And welcome back to another episode of the Astros Future podcast here on the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Price, also known as Astros Future. You can find my work at astrosfuture.com. Find me on X at Astros Future.
I'm your co-host, Kenny Van Doren.
All right, so today we're recording on a Monday. The Astros just a couple hours ago officially announced the signings of the draft picks. We broke it down with Joe Doyle last week, but Kenny and I wanted to hop on here, talk about the signings a little bit, and then maybe get into a little deadline talk. But I think the big news today, Kenny, because most of the signings have already been kind of reported either through some other media source or whatever, but the Astros officially announced they signed 20 of their 22 picks, with the two that were unsigned, 13th rounder Jack Beck, 15th rounder James Tronstein, which I think we knew that one was not going to sign. He had a pretty good commit to Vanderbilt. Beck was the one that was a little questionable, and I was hoping the Astros could get it done. Ultimately, they weren't. Still super pumped about the draft class, but just what's your thoughts on that right now with the announcement of the signings today?
It's unique, Jimmy, because this was the most draft picks that we've seen since the model shifted to 20 rounds in 2021, and you have 22 picks this year. First time having two first rounders since the Tucker and Bregman days of that draft back in 2015, right? 2015. So, I mean, it's been over a decade now. And I think you got to see more of this Dana Brown regime in his front office and his scouting department take probably its most, I wouldn't say aggressive, but complete approach. You saw it last year too. I think a lot of it was in last year, taking Jace Mitchell and Xavier Nayans, especially in the first round, but at the top of the draft, and leaning on those guys to be your future prep players. But this time around, it seemed like there was a lot of combinations of it. You got two college guys where you've seen the Astros really test some of these college players, even guys going back to when James Click and his front office were still together. The Astros like to challenge some of those guys, and you're going to see that as well. You saved money on them. You went out and got two prep bats that you see as high upside hitters with multiple tools in the field as well, and can throw and run. I think it was more complete. Yes, it was very unfortunate that they didn't come away with one more signing that we'll get to here in a second. But I think altogether it was very complete, and we got to see where they really want to move going forward if Dana Brown and a lot of these guys are retained next year.
Yeah, I think taking Logan Hughes, that was probably one of the picks that I would say in Dana Brown's tenure we can probably say is maybe one of the safer picks. He's kind of gone underslot a little bit, not nearly as aggressive with Bryce Matthews, Walker Yannick, some of those guys, but this year with Logan, and it sounds like a knock to say he's a safe pick, but he's a safe pick because his bat is it's legit. I mean, I think he doesn't have the upside with the speed and the defense, but obviously we know what he can provide offensively, and then he probably doesn't have the risk of like the swing and miss like we've seen out of some of these other picks that Dana Brown and his group have made. So interesting to see them go that route. Before we get on to a few other picks, but I was super intrigued to see how they were going to. This is the biggest bonus pool they've had in a long, long time. Like you mentioned, 22 picks, the most they've had since the draft restructured. I was hoping that they came away with maybe a few more prep players. Obviously, they got Keon Johnson in the third, signed him for $2 million, and then Bo Peterson in the fourth signed him for $3 million. Both of them well over slot, which kind of prevented them from going over slot anywhere else, which probably is a reason Jack Beck ended up not signing. But it just makes me think. I mean, Peterson getting $3 million. I think it's interesting. You go look at the Dodgers, their first round pick was a third baseman, Bo Lorance, and he signed, I believe it was for $3 million as well. And he was like the 30th overall pick. It just makes me think the Astros have a ton of faith in what Peterson can provide. And I know we talked about him with Joe Doyle, but everything I read on him offensively, like the one knock was that his power didn't show up in games, but he's clearly got the raw power. He won the home run derby in 2025 at the All-Star game, the high school home run derby. So that's a pick I'm super pumped about. And we talk about first time they had the multiple picks since 2015. Well, this is probably the first time they've had two prep players with this level of talent, Keon Johnson and Poe Peterson, also since 2015.
There's something about that KC area position players I think we've seen in the last couple of years, Jimmy, just athletes-wise. There's a lot of good power hitters and just overall baseball prospects that are coming out of there in the prep ranks and Mill Valley High School in Kansas. And when we first heard the number, and I think I could speak for the both of us, Jimmy, I was astounded. When I heard $3 million, when we heard it a couple of days before it was reported, I was thinking to myself, there's just no way. I feel like we're being tested. It's just such a huge bonus, and it was just going to eat up a lot of that money that probably would have went to the prep guys, as you mentioned, with a guy like Jack Beck, who in a different camp, I would say, than Bo Peterson. Bo Peterson had a lot of marks on his resume. He had all these kind of guys tracking him, and Texas Longhorns commit. Like, he has this long track record of people knowing who he is. For a guy like Jack Beck, he's committed to Georgia Southern. He wasn't really on the showcase circuit. Joe Doyle even talked about that. He went out there and didn't really see him. So scouts went to Tennessee, and then the MLB draft combine really boosted him as well. And I think we've mentioned it before. 466 feet was his longest home run. And then he smoked 21 balls over 100 miles per hour. Peak exit velocity was 113. So like, these high schoolers kind of coming out of nowhere and probably boosted his stock in Jack Beck over the last couple of months. But for Bo Peterson, he ate up a lot of that money that probably would have gone to a guy like Jack Beck as well. But someone like James Tronstein, and we had talked about this, and we even heard on draft day, see more as a backup option, and that can come out. It's almost like a negative way of saying that, but I don't want it to, because James Tronstein is still a very good prospect. It was just in the sense of they did not have the money or the financial planning to sign all four of those guys. If some of the top guys at the top of the draft ended up not signing and you had the money left over, James Tronstein was someone that you would go all in for. He comes from a very prestigious high school in Harvard Westlake in California, but he's a part of the best high school class that's going to Vanderbilt this next year. So that was a little bit of a tougher one to pull away.
Yeah, and I think we've seen the Astros do that. Most teams do it as well, but the Astros, and we were talking about it just before the show started, where every year it feels like they take a high school prep player late kind of as that backup plan. And I think we went back all the way back to like 2021. We were naming off a high school player drafted late that they didn't sign. That was the backup if these guys didn't sign. And clearly the Astros valued Keon Johnson, Bo Peterson. Bo Peterson getting the $3 million, even though he was the 4th round pick. I don't know how that exactly works out. The talks that they have, and Keon Johnson goes first and gets $2 million, which is still a really good bonus, especially when you look at some of the other guys. I mean, Landon Tomey was a top prospect. I think he got like 2.5 from the White Sox. So super pumped about both of those guys. I think really, really good high potential prospects to get into the system. And yeah, I think you nailed it with Beck. I think what that was maybe they had some kind of agreement in place, a little handshake agreement, thinking that this is what he's going to be worth. He has a great combine. And maybe his agent tells him like, hey, you're trending upward. Let's go to college and see what happens. And maybe you improve your stock and get a better bonus than currently what the Astros could offer. If Peterson signs for, $2.5 million, they probably get Beck for sure. But just with them being able to offer just the 150, probably just decided it'd be better to go to Georgia Southern, maybe get a little bit of NIL money and then just improve his draft stock. So I'd be curious to see if he's one, if he has a decent freshman year at Georgia Southern, if he ends up transferring to a bigger school.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to follow. And we've seen it too, Jimmy, when we were naming off those guys. Some of them just don't have the most success. Like in hindsight, it's like, oh, maybe just take this opportunity now, just get with a big league club and develop that way. Not saying that that's going to happen for a guy like Jack Beck. You never can predict what happens there, and everything has been trending up for him. Like I just mentioned, some of those numbers from the combine. So if that is the case, goes there to Georgia Southern, and we saw some tweets too. It's like, how did Georgia Southern pull this one off, getting a guy like him? And I think he was just so under the radar too. I think that just played in the favor of Georgia Southern, and I think he's going to be one that I'm very intrigued in tracking moving forward, because there was a good amount of buzz on our end, stuff that we were hearing, talking to people that it was leaning towards maybe signing with the Astros and ended up not happening. He's going to be the one that I'll have circled for the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. And, all high school players at this point are going to be they're a lottery ticket. They're a roll of the dice. You never know what you're really going to get, especially when you're drafting them later. The Astros last year took just from rounds 10 to 20, Landon Arroyos. Elijah Farley was another one. Obviously, they took Jace Mitchell. You mentioned Nyans. They've added a lot of young prep talent, and sometimes it just takes a little while. Ethan Wagner was 2 years ago, got hurt this year, but he'll be 21 next year, hopefully, in single A. But outside of that, we'll move on from the signing. So they've signed all their other 20 picks. We know where they're at. Kenny, I know we talked with Joe last week, and we kind of asked him his favorite picks and stuff. And I know we joked about Cam Durnan being your favorite pick just because he's a Missouri guy. But is there anyone else that you just in the draft that you're like, man, I'm really excited to see what this guy does when he gets into the Astros organization?
Yeah, I made a joke with Jim Callis. I was talking with him about this, Jimmy, and I said, I don't remember where I said it. I might have just messaged you. And I said Wes Mendez was going to be the guy that I think that climbs the system the fastest. And then we asked Joe, it's like, who do you think will be the first one to debut? And he said Wes. And it's such a crapshoot. Like I mentioned in that episode when I brought up that question of, who's going to debut first. The guy who debuted first from the 2024 class wasn't even drafted. So you just never know what the fit is going to be in 2 years. But the Astros haven't had the most success with left-handed pitchers in the system in the last 6 years, I would say. And the really one that you would circle is Colton Gordon. And I think Wes Mendez kind of comes with a similar pedigree of, comes from a bigger college. Of course, Colton Gordon did start at Florida before he moved to UCF to finish out his college career. But Wes Mendez comes from Florida State, goes to a pretty prominent high school in Jesuit in Tampa, and has like this kind of low slot low arm slot, and doesn't throw the fastball that hard, but he can top out at 96. He has probably the best changeup in the draft from the things I've read and the scouts I've talked to, and he sells it well with the arm speed, and it's just like there's a lot to like about Wes Mendez, and I think he has a very deep bag of tricks as well, and just improvements in the delivery and just his overall makeup on the mound. I think it's just going to bode well. I don't know why. I just have a lot of stock in the second rounder in Wes Mendez. And I know that's not, if someone wants to hear me talk about like a fifth rounder and, Gavin Eddy, I think will just be another Ethan Pecco. I don't know, just calling it now, just another fifth rounder, an AJ Blueball. But I think there's a lot to like with the low 80 slider and the upper 70s curveball and just everything that Wes Mendez brings to the table.
Yeah. And like you said, the Astros haven't had and Colton Gordon, made his way up. Trey Dombrowski's kind of stuck out in Double-A right now, but yeah, to get Mendez through the system would be great. Just kind of looking at some of the picks that really stood out. Michael Adari, 6th round, 6'6", 225. The Astros got a little bit of a value with him because he was a senior, so he's 22 years old. But just when you read his report, it's pretty impressive that what he was able to do when he was out there on the mound. But 92 to 95, the fastball touch 98 with a lot of sink, a low 80 slider. It says his low release height and extension, 6'6". So that was kind of a theme for the Astros, just big pitchers with big extensions. So really excited to see what he can do. And then I love looking at what guys do in wood bat leagues. I know we talked with Jim Callis about that, and he's saying that the pitching just isn't as good as it used to be in the wood bat leagues because people don't want to expose their pitchers to perform well, and then someone else try to scoop in and get them to transfer. But Aaron Pisecki, he was the 8th round pick out of Troy. He spent 2 years in the Northwoods League, which is where Spencer Urghetti actually kind of had his breakout. And he played in, let's see, it was 110 games. His first round, it was 60 games. He hit 329, and he had 45 walks to 18 strikeouts, which is just absolutely insane. His second stint in the Northwood League, he hit 406 with 36 strikeouts or 36 walks to 9 strikeouts. It's going to be crazy to have guys like him. Owen Nowak, let's see, there's a few others that just have crazy good back control. Petey Soto, these guys that the Astros just haven't really focused on guys like in the draft. They've kind of gone the power over hit. Cam Fisher, is an example, and the Astros are going to have guys that are going to have some really good bat to ball skills, and it'll just be fun. I always have a soft spot in my heart for guys that walk more than they strike out. So it'll be fun to see those guys as they kind of work through the system.
And it's been the whole ideology of this past year. You've seen it. Guys like Xavier Nayans probably striking out, looking more than you'd probably expect, just because they are trying to hone in on that zone. And now they're drafting guys that have that feel for it already at the college ranks, and maybe it bodes well for them in the future where they can focus more on adding this power or boosting that hit tool because they've just they've bested the zone. They've learned it, quicker than someone else, and they have to come in the system and have to have an overhauled approach, and they already have it there. And you even texted me. It's like, oh, the Astros are kind of going after guys that don't get as much swing and miss. And I was like, I thought you were talking about from the pitching side. I was like, yeah, I guess they're just getting guys who just get outs. And you're like, no, from the hitting side, like they are getting guys that just do not strike out, guys that want to get on base. And it's going to be interesting to watch because what happens if there are changes within the system? What if Dana Brown's regime, gets axed and no one's retained next year? What if there's changes to the coordinators? How do these philosophies change when you bring in a draft class that kind of fit this ideology that you just kind of started to hone in on a little bit more? That's going to be something to talk about next year as well.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I think it's just interesting to see the change over the years. And does that come from Dana Brown? Does it come from the coordinator of development, which I know was new this year, Sam Neidorf. I don't want to say his name wrong, but he was new in his role as well. So just interesting to see the difference. But all in all, I'm happy with the draft. 20 signings, 3 undrafted free agents. I really like the upside of Peterson and Johnson. So Good. I'm happy with the draft class. I think they went a good route. I think we're gonna have a few big leaguers here for sure, especially when you look at some of the top guys like Logan Hughes, Wes Mendez, Jack Riddell, and so on. But Kenny, I guess we'll go ahead and jump to the next part of the show. We kind of teased it a little bit, but we want to just talk a little bit about the trade deadline. And it's hard to speculate on what the Astros are going to do. We know they're under 500. They're a couple games out. In a normal season, they'd probably be maybe 10 games out by now, but the AL is just not very good, and the AL West is even worse. So they're kind of hanging in there. It appears the Astros are going to be buying. It looks like they're going to probably make trades to bolster the roster and get to the postseason. And I know we talked about it probably off air a little bit about our thoughts on should the Astros rebuild, because we know they could get an absolute haul for Jeremy Pena right now. Sounds like the Red Sox are throwing their top prospect out there as a potential trade return for a Pena or Zach Neto. And ultimately, we won't get into that because that could probably take forever. I was trying to figure out if we should buy or sell. But really, I kind of wanted to look at, Kenny, just a few prospects that we would like to see the Astros hold on to. I know for sure we're going to say that Xavier Nyans, Kevin Alvarez, they're off limits. Top 2 prospects, top 100 guys. They're truly the start of the next wave of talent coming to Houston. But outside of that, let's just do 2 prospects maybe that we think we'd like to hold on to. They have good value probably because they're performing well, which means they're probably going to be highly coveted at the deadline. But Kenny, what's the first one that pops in your head of a prospect you would just like to hold on to and make sure they're in the Astro organization come August 4th?
Yeah, I think he would be a good return just based on where he was drafted. But at this point, Bryce Mayer just continues to trend upwards. Yeah. He's the 2025 reigning Astros minor league pitcher of the year. Of course, he was a 16th rounder back in 2024. And that's what I'm talking about. If you can flip that, the value and everything that he's accomplished as a 16th rounder, I think that's still good for what the Astros are trying to accomplish at the major league level. But it's his first full time through AA this year. He reached the level last season before he hit an innings limit. But he's had 63 innings so far this year. He pitched 87 2/3 in his first full season of pro ball. But 2.86 ERA, 91 strikeouts, so 34 walks in 63 innings. The WHIP is at 1.19, batting average against 187. Everything is in his favor right now, just with his ability to move up the system. And I think this team had sold off some guys and just focused on the future. Bryce Mayer, Ethan Pecco would be fighting for starts come September, especially when the roster is expanded. I don't necessarily see a world where he debuts this year. I don't remember if we did like any bold predictions, but I think my bold prediction might have been that he debuted before Pecco. In my mind, I said maybe there is an avenue where he does get up at the end of the year, especially when there was so many question marks about the rotation and injuries that were happening. But that's the first guy I'd put behind those 2 guys at the top of the system, Jimmy.
Yeah, I had to pull up because I shared a stat the other day. It was actually, it might have been Sunday, but Bryce Mayer over his last 5 starts, a .36 ERA. He struck out 32 in 24 innings. He's held opponents to a 134 batting average against, 11 hits in 24 innings. So he's been good all season, but he has absolutely turned it on his last 5 outings. And at this point, I'd fully expect to probably see him in AAA here soon. It may just be a matter of arms, and if they don't have one ready to move up to AA, they need to keep one there. But yeah, Bryce Mayer's a good one. Couple that I'll go with one first one, and I'll save for a second one. But the first one that pops in my head that I'd like to see the Astros hold on is Anthony Huezo. And 12th round pick a couple years ago. I feel like he's probably a guy that teams are asking about. He's having a great year. We know he's completely tooled up. He's 20 years old. He's tied for the system lead in doubles of 21, has 4 triples, 17 home runs, 32 stolen bases, OPS of 861 between single A, high A at this point. Really good, good outfielder, super athletic, steals bases, has the pop. I know you were talking with Coach Van Horn. He just went to Missouri, and I know he had a lot of good things to say about him as well. But that's a guy that I'd love to hold on to. I think he has the potential to be an impact player. But the guys we're going to mention here are performing well, so that's why we say we want to hold on to him. But I know there's a chance other teams are for sure asking for him.
I don't know if I could highlight one name in just the top 30, Jimmy. I mean, that's the one I'm highlighting as most likely probably to get moved. And it's not in a bad way. It's just Anthony Huezo's value has never been this high. Yeah. He is having such a monster year for, after being, banged up with injuries in the past couple seasons and coming into 2026 and really gets that opportunity to stick at one level, and he earns his promotion. He continues to prove it. It's a 107 Hueso thing that Brandon Van Horn mentioned, where it's just no matter what, he can put 107 behind the bat. And I just think that I know for a fact there are teams calling about Anthony Hueso, and I just think that he's going to be a guy that a lot of teams will continue to talk about as the Astros kind of look for that next piece to push them over the edge.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give one more. I guess we'll do this like a snake draft. So I'll give one more, and then we'll let you do your last one. I'm moving to the pitching side. I went position player first, moved to the pitch side, and I'm between two. And I don't know if I'll mention both names. Maybe I'll just talk about. Gosh, this feels like I'm cheating by doing that. But I'm kind of between Jagger Beck and Nick Potter. And Jagger Beck drafted or undrafted in the 2024 draft at 17 years old, signs. And he just improved just like you would expect a 6'6", 17-year-old to improve. And he's 19 years old in single A right now. He's got a 2.67 ERA, 72 strikeouts in 60 innings. If he was a guy that was drafted in like the top 5 rounds, like he'd probably be a top 5, maybe top 10 prospect in the system and potentially pushing for higher. But since he's undrafted, he's got to kind of climb that ladder in terms of the rankings. But it's hard to imagine much more success for a guy that was undrafted. And then now in his full season debut, still a teenager, to have more strikeouts than innings pitched, to be holding opponents to only 48 hits in 60 innings. His last outing, he went 6 scoreless innings, struck out 6, so he's going deeper into games. Really good to see from him. And then if you were going to say Potter, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about him anyway, so you'll have to think of another one, Kenny. But Nick Potter as well. And I don't know ultimately what his ceiling is going to be, just because he was a college closer. He's moved to a starter. He's started 16 games this year. He's thrown 55 innings. He slowly built his way up, but he struck out 64. Once again, unhittable. He's allowed 35 hits and 55 innings. Just incredible. 2.26 ERA. He's bringing it back to 98, 99 miles per hour. Really good slider. He's added a curve this year. I feel like the sky's the limit for him. And if for some reason he doesn't make it as a starter, I just see him being like an electric reliever as well, just with the fastball slider combo. And then he kind of pitches with that swag that you probably want to see from a reliever as well. But yeah, outside of Hueso, I'll take 2 pitchers, Potter and Beck, once again, 2 that are probably getting asked about, understandably. But Kenny, who else are you looking at?
Yeah, that's where I was going with that one, was Potter. And you have a lot more to say about him, and speaking to him, you would know more to say, but he was definitely that guy that I've heard as, a name that's been floated as well that teams are interested in. And I thought Cole Hertzler might fall in that camp as well, of some of those guys, because I do think he's on track to be the Astros minor league pitcher of the year. Shout out Bryce Mayer for predicting that one. It was right on the nose. I'll go to the top of the system real quick and say Jason Schiavone. The Astros haven't had the most success with power hitting catchers in recent years. Yainer Diaz, it seems like it's been a little bit snapped, but for what Yainer Diaz was, where some people thought he might have been just a throw-in back in the what trade was that? Phil Maton?
Yeah,
No.
it was Yainer Diaz and Phil Maton for
Miles Straw. And so, the Astros are going after trying to get an experienced reliever, and they get a catcher of their future in there as well. And Corpus Christi is an interesting one because you do have Walker Yannick there. You have Will Busch as well. And Jason Schiavone can also play first base. So it's a lot of just circling those guys around as Walker Yannick came back from injury. And yeah, the offensive production, it has dipped since Jason Schiavone's been to Corpus Christi and make or break Texas League. It's a very hard park to play in Whataburger Field. But 743 OPS, in part to a 376 on base percentage heading into this week. He does have 34 walks and 59 Ks. The power has dropped a little bit. He has 6 homers and 4 doubles through his 48 games, which is more than he played at the beginning of the year in Asheville. But really a guy that came on the scene is a hitter that we weren't expecting. We knew about the arm. That's most certainly his best tool. It's a 60 grade arm. You can throw guys out. 33% last year, Jimmy, throwing out guys on the base paths. And it's just a guy that I think you have to have circled maybe as, let's keep him around. We don't know what the future holds maybe for Yainer Diaz. We have some uncertainty right now. I think it's fair to say. And Walker Yannick, who's been banged up with injuries, hasn't really put the power stroke together, offensive profile. Will Busch is such an interesting case. I always like kind of Will Busch and what he brings to the table, and he's continued to do it as a hitter, but maybe his future is at first base, as a left-handed swinger. And I just think all around, it's fair to say that, maybe Jason Schiavone is someone you keep through this trade deadline.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up. Actually, I just wrote an article today, 4 Astros prospects who have turned things around in 2026, and he was number one on my list for all the reasons you mentioned. The power showing up. He threw 33% of base stealers out last year, which is a good number. And I thought this was super interesting. He's up to 48% in Double A, which is, I mean, I think he's thrown 23 out of 48 out. So I mean, 48%, crazy good number. And obviously, he's got great arm strength back there. And you mentioned the power's down a little bit. The OPS 743 still respectable, but his strikeout rate has actually gone down a little bit from high A to double A. The walk rate has still been pretty strong, sitting around almost 20%. Yeah, really good prospect. I know Pipeline obviously just kind of did a little re-rank and aggressively put him number 3 in the system. I had a few other guys on there, Brett Gillis, Caden Powell, that I thought have kind of turned things around as well. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up Schiavone, and he's kind of proven it both, offensively and defensively. And I think he's probably got Walker Yannick, we know he's phenomenal defensively, but what Schiavone's been doing with the arm has been very incredible. And like you mentioned, going from, I think he hit under 200 last year in Fayetteville, it was like 195. And I think he only had like 6 or 7 homers. And then this year he's got 23 home runs. OPS is good. Walk rate's good. Playing well behind the plate. So understandable why Pipeline ranked him number 3. And like, if we're mentioning him here, they're probably in conversations as well. And I could see people asking for Schiavone just to because you probably put him as the top catching prospect in the system right now.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, he might move down. That ranking also doesn't include the draft picks. Yeah. They'll do those after the trade deadline. But yeah, it was a kind of pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting him to jump up that much. And but it's just another one of those where you find value in a 12th rounder back in 2024 at a James Madison. And it seems like the Astros kind of strike these little gold deals every now and then. You look at the top 5 and 12th rounder and Jason Schiavone, 16th rounder and Bryce Mayer.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's why these drafts, and we talk about not signing Beck earlier, but those picks, someone could look at as a throwaway pick. No, there's a ton of value in there. So that's all we got for today's episode. I do want to say, if y'all enjoy the show, please do us a favor, leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, 5 stars, subscribe, share on your platforms, wherever. Make sure you check us out on YouTube as well. But that's all we got for today's episode. So thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back for our next episode of the Astros Future podcast, covering your Astros in the minor league system.